Tonight's experience is sponsored by Dark Bark Shark Park. Thrills, frills, nil chill kills to feel fulfilled and feed full gills. We at Bare Minimum Productibutions are proud of our discerning tastes. From tasteful boudoir to high society sporting events, we know what it is to live refined. When you folks came to us hungry, we knew that on your honor and ours, we could not stand to let you down with anything other than the best. Your set menu for today is prepared by only the finest fins, claws, and tongues to ever grace the polite end of a knife. And the highlight for this evening will be the company we've dragged across time and space to join you on your evening of satisfying cravings. Bare Minimum Productibutions and Culinary Experiences presents Humanity and its Cannibal Communities. What's a found family gotta do to get someone to eat around here? While your table is set and your first course plated, a few words we have prepared. Yes, cannibals. No, not the kind who had to do it to survive, only groups who premeditated their actions, most having done it multiple times when there were other dining options. Yes, you may openly show your disdain, and no, we will not be assisting you in a duel should they challenge you to defend their honor. Although I am at liberty to inform you that we have Glocks on the menu today. Pre-order them and survive for the 10 to 15 minutes it would take for them to be brought out on their platters. Lastly, we regret to inform you that several groups you may have been looking forward to had turned down our invitations. Not limited to the early mid-historic Tahitians, Congolese, Papua New Guineans, and foremost among them the Kalinago, formerly known as the Carib during the incursion of the Spanish conquistadors to Latin America, and from whom the word cannibal is actually derived. For the lattermost folk, this is due to the unfortunate historic uncertainty surrounding the tales of them consuming their enemy's flesh. This is probably untrue, and definitely considered an offensive stereotype in the region these days. Academics and experts from the region have suggested the cannibal branding for the tribe was merely propagandist ammunition slung by imperialists to justify violence and subjugation. We will, truthfully, encounter certain instances of similar themes coming up during guests who are actually coming tonight, and whether or not this is true, or what value there would be in discussing the cultural relativism of cannibalism, is ultimately up to you to decide throughout the course of this dinner. I can go on to tell you that in addition to declining our invitations, the rest of our prospective list sent me recipes for steamed calamari with impressive variety and sophistication. I am obviously delighted by their sense of humor, and will be spending the rest of my night laughing, locked inside my office with a shotgun pointed at the door, to celebrate the joy I feel upon learning they had booked their tickets to come personally thank us for their invitations at our headquarters. In the meantime, please enjoy the pre-recorded introductions I have for each course meal as they are brought out by the communities assigned to you folk for each dish. Yell Donner for any and all concerns. Your hors d'oeuvres for this evening will be braised mushroom canapes, drizzled with the sincerest curiosity of our first guests, early history feudal aristocrats. Surprising to only the most obtuse among us, Homo sapiens regularly cannibalized one another through fits of practical hunger in their caves, onto bouts of warlike territorialism in their huts, and further forward during sprees of vainglorious bluster in their castles. None of this was particularly reviled for our earliest millennia, and some of it even held in the highest, almost divine regard. The ancient Egyptian pharaoh Unas was entombed with an engraving of what archaeologists call the Cannibal's Hymn, which praises him in memory of his visceral devouring of fathers, mothers, and gods. Throughout other kingdoms of Africa BCE and well into AD, kingdoms would set aside slaves and war tributes to pamper for their eventual slaughter during great celebrations and dignitary feasts, openly craving for the opportunity to raise, trade, and partake in the consumption of what they called the flesh that speaks. Evidence of gastronomic or nutritional cannibalism and even ritualistic cannibalism is typical throughout the world and its first cultures, though of interesting mention are the extensive notes of it occurring with predictable consistency in ancient China. The Ben Sao Shi medical reference recommended cannibalism in varying degrees as an effective medical treatment, which would spread and continue to be accepted throughout early modern China and Europe, as late as the 17th century. So acceptable was the practice that sometimes, in a show of familial love, children and grandchildren would slice off portions of their own flesh to offer to their ailing patriarchs and matriarchs at the risk of their own lives. The point has been clearly made, and so it is with some hesitation that I will regrettably not elaborate further on anecdotes regarding the service of steamed child at meals of discerning upper-class citizens. The soup for tonight will be a zucchini bisque, made from backyard-grown ingredients fertilized in partnership with the rituals of our friends and half of your second set of visitors today, the Aghori devotees. Dignified and spirited as they are stylish and pointed in belief, the Aghori actively rebel against orthodox religious beliefs and cultural standards, most famously by practicing a form of voluntary cannibalism. For millennia, devotees aware of their tenets and practices have been offering themselves, or rather their bodies, up to be consumed by these ascetics upon their natural deaths. In returning the favor as spiritual pillars of their communities, Aghori practice that which is called endo-cannibalism, or voluntary cannibalism between consenting parties within an aware community. Another example of endo-cannibalists, rounding out this course's guests, would be the ancestral Wari, or Paka Nova, whose tribe continued to live in the Amazon. Until 1960, the Wari practiced mortuary cannibalism by leaving the bodies of their deceased beloved to decompose for a few days before ultimately roasting and consuming parts of their flesh, primarily the heart and liver. Though the natural fermentation of the meat would cause an expected sickly reaction, it was always done out of great respect and devotion, believing this would keep the spirits of their ancestors within their living family members. Though worlds apart and yet pleasantly similar, such that cannibalism keeps their communities and traditions alive, the Aghori and the Wari may keep you folk pleasant company without incident. The next four groups, well, let's say they don't ask people first to lay down on their grills. This evening's appetizers will be crawfish cocktails served chilled and smoking, befitting our secretive third set of guests from the Leopard Society. The fine line between the groups of the first half of tonight as a faction of elites partaking in cannibalism for tradition, and the latter half of groups as you'll come to find them, fugitives and underground elements consuming other humans for reasons even more sinister than you'd expect. Yeah, I see what you're thinking. Yeah, it gets darker than that. The Leopard Society, or the Anyoto as they were sometimes called, operated in West Africa from 1890 to 1935. And other than prowling local high society for potential recruits, they allegedly also literally prowled dark streets and savannas, looking for the chance to strike at vulnerable prey. According to regional accounts, compounded by international correspondences present at the time, the leopard men dressed in leopard skins and ambushed lonely and lowly travelers with armaments fashioned from their namesake animals' teeth and fangs. The story then goes that these men would consume these unfortunate victims, sometimes still thrashing, until their life essence would be completely snuffed out and drained. Now, it is important to note that the extremes of this story are rightfully doubted, and has been disputed as nothing more than typical conspiratorial fare against secretive elite societies, with an imperialist twist designed to make locals fear their countrymen in possession of privilege and wealth. Whatever the case, both foreigners and the region's natives gave the organization and its members a wide berth in day and night, until the society was forcibly disbanded in the times leading up to the Second World War. The salad we'll be serving you tonight will be a fiambre, grown, harvested, and put together by friends all the way in Guatemala. Feel free to use any of the assorted dressings in front of you while your next set of guests hash things out between themselves. They aren't quite on the best of terms with each other, but I'm sure with some conversation they'll find they have some stories in common. The outlaw cartels of Mexico are popularly synonymous with brutal conduct balanced against strict, moral override codes of operation. As an act universally regarded as ferocious and a line that can't be crossed by most modern societies, cannibalism plays quite often into the mythology of several cartels, and particularly in regards to their initiation rites. The Knights Templar organization is the cartel most cited for exercising these sorts of passage rites, relayed by escapees from their camps, former members, undercover federal agents, and even private investigative reporters. Prospective knights are to murder someone as instructed by their recruiters and screeners, and proceed to kneel down and devour their victims' hearts before being allowed to continue with their application. Of similar reputation are members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, whose initiates are said to be punished for transgression and/or earn their promotions by being tasked to consume human flesh during their rigorous training periods. However, the most high-profile reports of cannibalism among the Mexican cartels would be the multiple witness accounts of notorious Los Zetas leader Heriberto Z3 Lazcano consuming human buttocks as his cut of choice. It certainly would track that these myths are perpetuated alongside other fear factor stories regarding the cartels. Although the matter-of-fact discussion of these stories by government agencies meant to dispel these rumors and combat fear-mongering does leave one questioning and hungry for a gruesome kind of certainty. We are very proud to present you with a filet mignon for today's main course, served with the same love and care put into raising the baby cow it took to fill your plates. The next guests will be a rowdy bunch. May we recommend a pinch of pepper and salt sprinkled on your plate as you like, while you avoid eye contact, interruptions, and questions as much as possible? The Chijon family were a criminal element operating in South Korea for a year in 1993, motivated by a professed hatred for the rich and, according to the wonderfully eloquent manifesto they wrote, a disdain for women up to and including their own mothers. Under threat of calling these same mothers, we've asked them to spare the details of the monstrous assaults, robberies, and murders they committed against women and the elderly, none of whom particularly wealthy by the way, and instead use their time to talk about the crime that earned them a spot at your table tonight. Following the abduction of a couple for extortion purposes, the Chijon family forced one of their enslaved female victims to murder the kidnapped couple. In order to get rid of the evidence that their corpses would otherwise leave, the gang then proceeded to openly barbecue and consume the flesh of their victims outside their hideout. Unaware locals were even invited to eat the skewers made from this horrific murder. But, to our knowledge, the only ones who partook were the members and in-house slaves of the family themselves. There would be no eating of the rich at all for the family, as shortly thereafter they would be caught and publicly executed for this and their numerous other crimes. Coming out shortly will be your dessert, a house specialty slice of deconstructed apple pie, while we take the time to deconstruct the myth behind the Cannibal Clan you've probably been waiting for this whole night. Sorry, Sawney boy. Sawney Bean was the head of a clan who'd lived in rural Scotland in the 16th century and was eventually caught and executed for instances of highway robbery and murder. According to the legends, Sawney Bean began a family with a vile witch-like woman while hiding out in local caves, eventually siring 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons, all third-generation children being products of incest. The Sawney Bean clan, as they would later be called, allegedly sustained themselves by ambushing hundreds of travelers over the years to drag back to their caves and consume raw, roasted, or cured. Though they would, in fact, eventually be caught and executed for any number of crimes, depending on whom is telling the legend, his legacy would live on, and on, and on. Interestingly, historians now believe that even should they grant that Sawney Bean's clan did engage in regular cannibalism, it was not to the extent that stories would have us believe, as the alleged cave showed no evidence of butchering of that magnitude, nor did any of the local or regional papers of the time mention anything about the supposedly hundreds of travelers and villagers missing and or abducted. It is safe to assume that the truth is somewhere under all that pie, however difficult it may be to decide which part one would prefer the truth to be. They're just about ready to head on in, so go on. Ask them yourselves. To cap off the night, we have a sorbet mignardise coming out for everyone around the table, while we are regaled by the true modern tale of IncrediblyShinyShart and his friends. This one does not begin or end the way one might think it would. In 2016, a man would get into a motorcycling accident that, while not fatal, would result in the amputation of his foot so as not to hobble the rest of his leg. Though he was dealt with a tragic and unexpected accident, as well as a morbid decision to make afterwards, the man of the hour in question gathered his friends and dug up an old conversation of theirs. If you had the chance to ethically eat human meat, would you? Without much further ado, and given the bewildered participation of the friends who didn't stop talking to him right then and there, IncrediblyShinyShart cut up, mashed, and prepared his amputated foot into ground meat, and served it up as tacos that he and his friends proceeded to consume. He apparently tastes like buffalo, but chewier. A strange kind of sweet to go with all that savory, huh? We hope you've enjoyed the meals and company we've prepared for you this evening. Do feel free to stick around and continue to converse, but not for too long, as our budget's running dry and we have only one idea left for keeping our fine guests fed. We've left complimentary dental care by the exit. The meat we got was a little stringy tonight. We'll do better next time. That's a personal guarantee. Take care and hurry back. Don't forget to always let someone know where you plan to be. We'd hate for anything to happen, and for any of you to expire alone and desiccate into a ghoulish exhibit. Wouldn't we?